that I'm representing. This is a department I have where weekly I play on the internet, on Podbean, and on Roku, on TuneIn Radio, iHeart, and just down the list you can find the show. There's about 248 hours now. You can listen to 248 hours of classic oldies. The second department is the Underground Shepherd. Because I pastored for 40 years, I have a shepherd's heart and I can't get rid of it. I just can't. So I've decided that I'll just be off the radar and a little under the radar, I should say. And so, hey, come on in. And so, needless to say, that's what I'm doing. Is I've been involved in about anything. Since everybody's walking in, I'm going to take a photo of you just so I can see how pretty you all are. You guys ready? Here we go. Smile, everyone. This is the gang. Now you can take a picture of me. And seriously, guys, they say I'm the pastor of this city, and I don't know how they come up with that, but they say you're everywhere, and you go to every event, and you're blessing everything God's doing. And so I think that should be how an old pastor, goes out. He doesn't have to have a church. He's just involved in the life of the city. And so Underground Shepherd has afforded me the opportunity to do that. And also, this is a branch of ministry where I can go and minister overseas. So I actually go to a lot of places, South America. Primarily, it's been Peru, Argentina, Bolivia. Brazil, I should say. And now more recently, I've kind of moved towards Asia. And I'm going back to my second time to Cambodia. So, helping fight human trafficking and such. So, I tell you what, I don't want to ever miss an opportunity to just share the light of God. Now, I apologize. I just got over a cold, and I'm probably a little hoarse sounding, but I think we'll get through it. Here's the final department, so you know who I am. Worship City Alliance. Makes sense. This is a city full of all kinds of worship, right? And people come here hoping to have an opportunity to record or do something. And a lot of people are really, they're tested beyond their ability sometimes, waiting on God to open the right doors. But you meet a lot of great people in the meantime. And needless to say, I think some great albums, and people have really had a great community for writing in particular if you're a songwriter. Worship City Alliance came out of 777, that's July the 7th. We were at the big football stadium downtown, and there were 100, I'm going to say almost 100,000 people. We had marched through the city, had a big rally of praise and worship, and out of that came a pastoral alliance. It's kind of like the Nashville Pastoral Alliance. And the pastors, leaders, intercessors, missionaries. And so the Lord's given me the opportunity to chair that in the city. Gives me a chance to interact with a whole lot of folks. But I don't want you to know any of that more than I want you to know how much I'm sold out to Jesus. I'm still a Jesus freak. I can't get enough. And because of that, I want to read an article to you that might give you an indication of why I chose this title. I partly chose the title to get your interest and see if you'd come and hear me. What's he talking about, taking water to the ocean?
What's he talking about?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Exactly. I knew somebody would do that. All right, I want to read a little bit of an article to you that you may have actually already read, but I want to see how this impacts you. And I think after I read it a little bit, you'll understand why I chose the title. Francis Chan wrote this. How many know the writings of Francis Chan? He recently announced this. He says, "My family and I are going to move to Asia in February. A few months ago, we were in Myanmar, which is the old Burma, in Myanmar." And he said, "My wife and I, my kids, we were there. And we were with a translator going from hut to hut in these slums, trying to explain to people who Jesus is. These people had never, ever heard of him. and the eagerness, the way they listened, seeing people get baptized, it was just like, wow. Do we do on a normal day anything that even compares to this? And as I got on the plane on the way home, I looked at my wife and said, honey, I think it's time to move. Wow. It goes on to tell how the Lord spoke to him through that experience. And I won't read it all, but I hope you'll find it on Christian Post or other places. And obviously, I am preaching somewhat to the choir here who have left the comfort of the U.S. and gone to other nations and are a part of that. But we still need to stop for a moment. I hope to inspire you to think about that. Whatever we're doing, we always need to stop, look, and listen. Because am I just repeating an old pattern? An old thing that's always been done? You know, am I taking water to the ocean? I know I'm personally convicted even by the words of Keith Green back in the day, where he would say, you know, if God has not told you to stay, He's already commanded you to go. Yeah. And even if it's a short-term mission, and I've never been able to get past that. I know I'm obligated to bring to the nations the love of Jesus. It doesn't have to be your whole life necessarily in the sense of living over there for many, many years. It could be just short-term. But I really think it opens up some new understanding of how great this commission is. I want you to pray with me, if you will. Lord, I thank you for those who are here today, and I'm asking, Lord, you would awaken us. This is a word I'm holding on to. I'm pulling down this word awaken. Yes, we have been prompted to and be stimulated a lot by many of the things said today, how we've been inspired by people who have found their niche and folks who have done things that we would never imagine, like we just saw. And we're saying, God, we want that expansion to continue inside of us. We want this to be a very important weekend of awakening so we can see, Lord, are we taking water to the ocean? Have we really felt the felt need enough that we can meet it? And I pray you'll help us to do that in Jesus' name. So my assignment in these few moments, and I hope I can do it, is to help change mindsets if there's any mindsets that need changing. I'm pretty sure most of you are pretty radical on these things, but I want to say that maybe this message would encourage you as you're trying to recruit other young missionaries and people that you know God's got a call on them, but they just don't know what to do with it. And we need to encourage them. You know, I think the most important single thing about our spiritual journey is how we think about God. And the truth is, you know, my image of God will drive every single part of my life. You know, do I live a life of faith? We've been really challenged on this raising of our support. And he didn't like the word support. He said partners, right? You know, am I living my life in a vibrant pursuit of God through the boldness and the conviction and the passion that He put in my heart when I started? I know that this is one of the felt needs in a niche because there's a lot of unchurched old hippies that are still out there that don't go to church. And so sometimes they'll listen to Full Circle on iHeartRadio or something, and they'll go, oh my God, I've had these letters. I remember where I was at that time when I heard that song. I was dating this girl, and we were on fire for Jesus, and gosh, I haven't been in the church for years. And we've got to help kind of capture some of these old folks that I still believe they love the Lord. They may be saying yes to God and no to the church, you know. But in truth, we know that some of them need to be recruited and refired and put back into the mix because they have a great a gift mix. And so I want to challenge you here as we think about this for a few moments, because as I said, I'm a shepherd at heart, and I really want to see everyone find their sweet place in God, that sweet place where you know I'm totally satisfied that I'm in the will of God. You know, a missing piece is very often who we see God to be and how we think of Him. And I've realized over the years that I have had mindsets that because I just held on to it, because tradition, the way I was trained, I didn't go past that to really see how much bigger God was, how many more dimensions He operates in. And I'm discovering stuff that's mind-blowing. I can't even wrap my head around it because He's so awesome. And so I really think that's the point that you ask yourself this afternoon, what has shaped my ministry? What has shaped my image of the nature of God? Because I believe in this concept that we have what we behold. And sometimes I'm locked in my mindset because I just have not expanded. Well, I'm out here doing this stuff for God. But I'm always trying to find ways. How can I do it differently? How can I find new... And I'm really thankful for all these conversations we're having. I really sense that people are really asking good questions. But every new place requires us to change our understanding of God's true identity so we can better see His identity and see ours. Not long ago I read an article, I think it was the Denver Rocky Mountain News. I don't get it, but I just happened to see it online. And this is what it said on this one side. It said, click on the pray button and transmit your prayer to the only or the last only known location of God. In other words, you could send prayers via a radio transmitter to God's last known location, a star cluster called M13. I guess believed to be one of the oldest in the universe. And reports is that 50,000 prayers a week come to that site. Now that tells me there's 50,000 people a week that are desiring communication with God. And they're willing to even take the risk that maybe they can find Him through this site. Now, how many people who don't have a computer or don't have this information, but they're still just as hungry? They're still just as needy for living water. And I think Francis sets an example here. He's going, I love the church, but I'm tired of preaching to the church. You know, it's really hard to retool the church. I found that in all the years I've pastored, it was my hardest job, was to, in some way, try to retrain stubborn folks who were stuck in their ways of how they saw God. And I love the church, and I still believe that God has a place in my life for the church, but I have a hard time being in the church, I'll be honest. I have to find an expression that's a little bit freer and a little bit less structured, and I'm done with politics, and I'm, you know what, I won't go down that road. So basically, their best effort, these folks, 50,000 of them, are sending a prayer out via internet in hopes that God would touch them. Because they see God as something that's distant, removed, possibly untouchable. And that's why we have such an incredible opportunity with the gift mix in this room. I mean, to think about what we've seen this week and what's in this room, that God can be experienced through drama, music, and film, and writing, and painting, and sound, and frequency, and light. There is no limit. So, I want to say that the Scripture is full of encouragement of how we can spread this light more efficiently. I want to look at Exodus 3:3 for a moment. This is really an exhortation to you this afternoon to encourage you, and the second part of this will be what to do when you're weary and you want to quit and you need to sign up again before you leave. I have found that many times as a vineyard pastor over the years, I would be so burnt out and ready to throw in the towel. Jack Hayford says 1,500 pastors a week resign their congregation or they're on their way out the door in this nation. 15,000. That seems like a lot, doesn't it? I'm sorry, 1,500. Yeah, that is a lot. 1,500 a week is a lot, though. That are just saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of getting beat up. My marriage is a mess. My finances are a mess. I can't lead and herd cats anywhere. So it just they get so easily upset and offended over the smallest stuff. And so I've been working with a group called Standing Stone out of Southern California that's trying to shepherd the shepherds and encourage them to not quit, because we need shepherds. but it's hard. And so I hope the ending here will be able to encourage you if you're feeling some burnout here. Exodus 3:3, Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God, and the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire. Now we love all this, sound and lights and frequency and all these things that awaken our senses. I mean, you could get a little sensory overload if you hang around ACT very long, because there's so many wonderful things happening. Well, anyway, the angel of the Lord appeared to him, a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. And then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight. Why didn't the bush burn? What's going on here? I can't believe it. Amazing. It's burning, but it's not burning up. I think I would really have loved to have seen that in person. We won't go through the whole story of Moses, but you remember how his life was divided up in threes. The first 40 years he spent as a prince in Pharaoh's court until he killed an Egyptian. The second 40 he was a shepherd out in Midian and just waiting and being forgotten, just feeling like his life really didn't matter that much. And the last 40, well, he's a king. Isn't that amazing? In Jeshurun, so changeable is the life of men. So here he had finished the second 40 when he received his commission to bring Israel out of Egypt. Now, Moses was born to be Israel's deliverer, but he didn't know that at the beginning. And none of us know where God's going to take us next. I keep loving the fact that many of the things we're doing right now are just starting places. Now, you have no idea how God's going to expand it if you'll trust Him, if you wait it out. And sometimes you think, well, I'm going around the mountain here, nothing's happening. Very little response, very little income, all of this. Well, at this point, he comes to Horeb, the mountain of God, or it's a place called desolation. That's what the word means, desert or desolation. And I don't know if anybody can relate to a desert, but that happens. The bush is burning with fire, but the bush is not consumed. Now, I think God uses bushes because there's two things very distinctive in this story. One, that God was in the midst of the desert. He was in the midst of the delay. He was in the midst of the uncertainty and the confusion about, so God, what do I do next? And number two, the bush was not consumed. Now that's important to note. In other words, the bush drew him in because of the sight. And yet, and that's what God does. He'll use signs and wonders. He'll use people who come into our lives, events. I hopefully believe that some people coming here checking out ACT will be drawn in by a bush that's on fire. Maybe it's your bush. I hope it is. So here, the Lord sees him in verse 4 through 6. And the Lord saw, he turned aside to look. And hold this in your mind. We've always got to be in a place where, regardless of where you are in your ministry right now, where you will stop, look, and listen. In other words, you've got to turn aside from time to time. We can get so focused on what we feel called to do, our passion, our, disciplines, which are good in themselves. But my mom always said, when you come to a railroad track, you need to stop. Not kind of go through, drift through. That's not good. You need to really stop. And then you need to look both ways. And then you need to listen. There's a spiritual principle in this. That when we come to a place of uncertainty, or when we come to a place where we just say, all right, what's next, Lord? I feel like nothing's shifting here. Well, that's a good place just to stop. And then look. What's going on here? The prayer I pray now at the end of, not the end here, but just at this place of my walk, I'm not praying, God, why are you delaying? Oh, God, why didn't you answer my prayer? Why did you let those people, those supporters leave me and get angry? And why did this door close? I worked so hard, got it all ready. And then, bam, I couldn't even make the presentation. What's going on, God? I don't ask those prayers or pray those prayers anymore. I have only 2 prayers that I'm praying right now. God, what are you doing you want me to see?
Yes.
And what do you want me to do? That pretty much settles it. When you learn to trust the processes of God, you don't really have to ask questions anymore. We all know how it's going to turn out. He gets his way. He gets his way every time. Might take a while for us, but in truth, the door is in the floor, my friends. The door to moving on in God and your ministry is going lower still. The door is in the floor to stay as low as you can be so that He can be everything He wants to be through you. That means I've got to deny myself. I've got to put down my ministry ideas. I've got to put things on hold and not have a hissy fit about it. I know I've done this so many times where I go, God, I'm churning, I'm gritting my teeth. I put so much effort into this. I really, really felt that this is the way we were going to go, and I felt like you had told me to do it, and nothing's happening. And to nail that thing to the cross. Delay, right, Denny? Delay. We hate it. Here in the midst of the bush, we hear God saying to Moses, here I am. In other words, okay, Moses, I got your attention. Sit down. Let's have a cup of coffee. Let's talk about it. Let's find out what's going on here. Take your sandals off your feet. You're not going anywhere. The place you're standing is holy. And I'm not going to give any time to something that you're treating as common. This is one of the big things we have a problem with, is we take that which is holy and it somehow becomes just common every day. And we've got to understand it's holy. The worship that we do and the things that He's anointed us with, this is a holy thing. It's not for sale. It's not for sale. We can't compromise it no matter if nothing seems to come from it. My ministry has never been for sale. I learned that as a really young pastor, where somebody was supporting our ministry and then found fault with us and didn't like the way we were doing things and said, you know what, you have to do it my way. I've been supporting you financially. And I realized very clearly this was my first big test. I needed the money. I wanted the money. I prayed about it. I met with him the next day and I said, sir, this is a check. It's all the money you give to us. I took it out of my own bank account. I'm not for sale. I'm sorry. I have to obey God. I'm not for sale. Boy, he was angry. He was so angry. But nonetheless, I knew he took the check. He did. In case you're wondering, he spent it. The second thing is that you see the bush, but then He's waiting for us to turn and look. And that's what I wanted you to hear me say. Is stop, look, and listen, because there's things He wants to tell us in that place. Just be careful around strange fire, because strange fire can consume you pretty quick if you're missing God's timing on this. Now, we only have a few minutes, and I want to shift just for a moment to encourage you in this journey. I don't want you to leave feeling anything that would lean towards judgment or condemnation or I've just missed it. Look, God's perfectly satisfied with you right now. He's crazy about you. You couldn't do one thing to make Him happier with you right now. It's not about all these things you're doing, the success of an album or how many bookings you get or if you get the money to pay for this trip you're hoping for when you get back. There'll be money there. None of that really matters. It's all about the heart, isn't it? All about the heart. And I can tell you with total confidence, and this is why it's so important that we get a revelation of sonship. We are His and He loves us unconditionally. And we're so geared towards doing stuff, and it's just, we're eaten up with things I have to do to make God pleased. You don't. Just be a son. You don't have to do stuff. I had a hard time after I actually retired the church of thinking, well, he's probably going to take me home now. My job is over. And I had to have some friends dig me out of my little pity party and out of a cave that I dug into and said, no, the assignment he gave you has not changed. It's just going to look a little different than you thought it would. I didn't know it was going to be all this.
Wow.
But when I let go and said, yes, Lord, here's some things I want us to just remember. I know you probably already know them, but I heard this guy he was running a marathon. The pastor of this church just told me in the hallway tomorrow he's going to do a marathon. That's pretty cool. And then he's going to try to come and be with us after that in our Saturday meeting. So we'll see what happens. This guy said he was evaluating his running experience in the marathon. He wrote it this way. Once I crossed mile marker 20, all the hype and excitement were long gone. Because most of the people were gone. He was one of the last to finish. He said it wasn't fun anymore. He said this is where it really gets dangerous emotionally. I just wanted it to be over. He says I was tired, exhausted, my legs were heavy, and running was a burden. Not much glory in it. He didn't do it in any respectable time at all, but he finished. And he said something like this. He said, for all the pain, the suffering was worth it because I became something I wasn't. I became a finisher.
Yeah.
Now, my friends, that is much more important than we realize, because in the midst of trials and struggle, it's hard to see the goal line. It's hard to see the glory that's set before us, as Jesus talks about, in his own walk. The finisher is those who with great difficulty keep on going and despite the odds make it. Now, I've got a young missionary friend in Cambodia I hope to see in February, and she wrote this blog, and I was moved by tears. Here's a young girl, about 24 years old, who left the States and went to work among the poor people there in Cambodia, and she wrote these in such a transparent way. You might have written a letter like this one time. Maybe it's time to come back to this. We do it freely. Nobody's compelling us, forcing us. And I want to catch that fire again. And this is her fire. A couple of days ago, I was driving my motorcycle in the pouring rain. My clothes were getting soaked, the wind was pushing my moto sideways, and street sewage water was splashing on my legs. And I remembered my new commitment not to complain. So I breathed deeply and decided I wasn't bothered. But out of nowhere, the presence of God fell, and it felt like peace being poured on the top of my head. Into my heart, I got a little giggly. Had to focus harder as I drove. And the Holy Spirit said, you can't fully love what you can't fully accept. For one moment, grace opened up for me to accept all the pieces of missions. The pain, the joy, the loss, the difficulty with language, the beauty, the trauma, the adventure, the corruption, the revival, the finances, the privilege of loving the poor, the distance from my family, the pain of loss of a grandmother who died and I wasn't there. The honor of being positioned to disciple a nation. And I gave myself permission to accept reality, the good and the bad. I laid down what I thought Cambodia should be like and my complaints. And I accepted it for what it is. And the Father helped me accept both light and darkness so I could love Cambodia fully. The Father helped me accept both light and darkness. That's an interesting concept. Our Father fully accepts the light and darkness in us, and that's what makes us experience His love so powerful. And He wants us to be like Him. And she said, until this week, I never realized how much a complaining heart in the name of authenticity, had been holding me back from breakthrough and acceptance and love. I'm really rocked by this. As I read it, and I wrote her, and I said, "You are my hero." I've been doing this a long time, but little lady, you're somebody, I'm in your corner, and I'm going to come and see you when I come back in February. And just encourage you. And I want more young people, not in this room. We don't have a lot of young folks in this room, but we got to get them awakened to this call that God has said, and He said, stay. You are called to go. You're commanded to do the things, the works of Jesus. Now here's the rub. Jesus said, you're going to do the things I did. Oh, no, you're going to do greater things than I did. Folks, I want to start doing the things so I can do the greater things. And I know some of you have been doing the things that Jesus did, but I don't know where you're at on the scale at all, but we've got to be empowered by the Holy Spirit to do all that Jesus did. And that means, casting out the darkness around us, laying hands on sick people and having them get well, eyes open, blind see, those who are lame walk, the dead being resurrected like it is with Mozambique and Heidi Baker and Hogan and some of those folks down in Mexico. I mean, it happens in these other places. What's wrong here, And I know that the problem's not up there, as Bill Johnson says. He said, God told me, he says, Bill, the problem's not up here. I've already commissioned you to do these things. We need to be freshly filled with His love and His presence. And so the challenge, it's tough. And I accept that reality that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. There's been times when I would lose radio stations, and I'm on a number of radio stations with Full Circle, because I played Amy Grant, and they said, we can't play that because she's been divorced. Oh. Well, listen to the interview that I did last week and see if you think she's got any passion for God. And if she's not willing to admit her mistakes. Oh, I can't play Bob Dylan. He's secular. And that mindset is there as much as racism is in a lot of places in our country. Things that we thought we were all past. It's just not, it's not changed in the heart of man in many places. And we've got to be, I keep telling people this, the shift is here and you are the shift. You are the shift. The one next to you. You need to look at him in the eyes. Say, I am the shift. You're the one that can make the change. We love this passage, and I'll close here in a few moments, but be reminded of Hebrews 12:1. This is so powerful. I love this again, but let's look at it once again. Hebrews 12:1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything. What is your hindrance? What is that would keep you from the very best that God called you to? What keeps you from the passion you had when you first signed up? What discouraged you? What rejection? What betrayal? Who lied against you? Who took a position that you thought would be yours? Who's aligned you, misrepresented you? And listen, if they walk in this door right now, you would find out how you feel about them. You can say, I've forgiven them, brother. Well, I'll tell you what.
I'm looking for Nate Butler.
That was the perfect time. I asked you to come in at 5:56, just perfect.
I will attest there is nothing between those two that's mean or anything like that. It was just totally an accident.
She's my best friend. So in truth, you'll find out if they walk in the door how you feel. Can I give you a little secret? You may have read about it in R.T. Kendall's book, Total Forgiveness. You'll know you're forgiven when you never have to tell the story again. See, we kind of like to tell the story. When we're rehashing it, a little bit of self-vindication, feel, don't want to admit it, but it's true. And I think we've got to go back to that story he uses from Joseph, who had every reason to be angry with his brothers. And yet when they came to buy grain from Joseph there, and they were afraid, he looks at him and he goes, "Don't be afraid. You haven't done anything to me." What? We threw you into a pit. We abandoned you. We told Dad you were dead. We brought all kinds of pain and sadness to him. He said, "You haven't done anything to me. This was God." What the devil meant as evil is turned to the good because God had a purpose.
Yeah.
And folks, I'm going to tell you this is a secret that has absolutely changed everything in my life. I do not have permission to hold resentment or offense against one person. And I've had plenty of reasons as a pastor of 40 years with people in the church. I actually have had personal loss in my own life. I've had abandonment. 10 years ago, one of the reasons I retired our church and went into the cave is because my wife of 35 years decided to go another direction and went back to the West Coast. The one that Keith Green wanted me to marry, and I did. He was our matchmaker. And we're still friends, and she's pursuing the Lord, and so I love her. She's a precious lady. But that loss, the shame, the embarrassment I felt, it really was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard not to feel like everybody's going to judge you now. You're a failure. And one of the things I realized is how proud I had been, and how arrogant and conceited in some of my ways. And the Lord just pulled that all back. And he says, "You got a lot of repenting to do, don't you?" And I had to repent to people that I had been strong with and hard with. Just because I was passionate didn't mean I had the right to abuse them as a pastor. I had to go back and make those things right. And to my knowledge, unless there's one or two that I don't know, I feel like all those accounts have been settled in the last 10 years. But one of the things that I realized is that I had to forgive unconditionally. And that's a hard one. When you feel the absolute rejection, abandonment issue that so many are feeling now, and loss. But you can't even carry a tiny bit of it. It has to be completely crucified and put under the cross. And if you haven't been able to do that, there are people here who can help pray with you and encourage you in it. He says, throw off everything that hinders. That means I've got to throw off, and this might be a little tough for you, all my speculations, my reasonings, my imaginations, all the things that exalt themselves above the kind of God. Why isn't it working? What have I done wrong? Why didn't that person come through for me? Look, folks, we spend so much energy in needless speculation. Why did that happen? We live back there, and we've got to let that go and completely walk away and turn our back on it. We can't give over to speculations and reasonings and trying to figure things out. We've got to let it go and align ourselves with the mind of Christ. And say, I'm not sure what happened then, but you know what? I know what's happening here. I'm following you all the way. And you're worth it. And so I'll end it with this understanding of the word perseverance, because that's what I'm calling you to as we pray here. Perseverance for the next season. And I think sometimes it's good to look it up in the dictionary and we forget sometimes what it really means. It means tenacity, determination, being steadfast, purposeful through patient endurance, diligence, dedication, commitment, despite difficulty or delay. It's a process. It's not something where you can take a blue pill in the morning and it just happens. Folks, the way in is the way on. I want to say it again. Think back to where you came in to this calling. The way in is the way on. And your only responsibility is to take the next step. You do not have to know how it's all going to come about, how it's all going to finish up, except He'll get the glory. It doesn't matter if nobody finds you on the webpage. It doesn't.